how do you copyright your music? When people ask this question, I think 9 out of 10 times what they're referring to is sending a letter or an online registration to the Library of Congress, paying that fee, and then getting a sort of fancy receipt from the government saying, you have registered your works with us, these songs, this album, this one song, whatever it is. But that's not actually what copywriting is. So this is probably going to be a topic that I'll just come back to over and over and over again, because I've made a few videos on it already. But as new people maybe stumble across my channel, they may not be aware of how it works. So a copyright is not created by registering your songs with the Library of Congress. The government does not issue you a copyright. It's not like you have to ask permission from a government to say, can I please have the rights to this song that I've created? Thank you. It doesn't make sense, right? A copyright is actually created by you, the composer, the author, the writer, the producer, the person who actually creates the art form, the tangible art form. Now, the way that copyright holds up, and you can actually have a claim to it and actually defend it in court if you need to, is the song needs to be in a tangible form, right? So an MP3, it could be printed bounced on a CD, a record. You could even have, if you have like melodies and lyrics and chords, you could write them down on a piece of paper. There you go. You've copyrighted a song idea, right? You can't just claim in your head you have a hit song written, and when some artist comes out with a song in a year, you say, hey, you ripped me off. I had it in my head last year, and you somehow plugged into my brain subconsciously and took my idea from me, so you owe me royalties. You guys see that if that were the rules of how copyrights work, we'd be in a society where nobody would make any music because everybody would be suing everybody, and it would just fall apart. So obviously there's some common sense that came along with the legislation for copywriting, and so having it in a tangible form, that's the key word, tangible. It's got to be a thing that's an objective reality, that somebody else can point to it and say, oh, I recognize that that's a song right there, right? I can look at that piece of paper, that's a song. Or I can hear it, there's this MP3 on this computer, and I can hit play on it and I can hear that, right? So that's how a copyright is created. It's just by you. Now, the Library of Congress situation, essentially what that's going to do for you, if you want to do that, is it's going to provide for you basically extra legal protection if there ever were a copyright claim against you, or you wanted to make a copyright claim against somebody else. So having this sort of official receipt from the government, it's kind of like sending a letter certified in the mail. Like if you had to send a very important letter in the mail that you wanted to make sure they received and you had proof that you sent it, you wouldn't just go stick a stamp on it and throw it in the mail. You want to actually go get it certified by the U.S. Postal Service. So there you have this pretty official document that claims, yes, this is going to hold up in court that this was sent certified, right? I got proof from a government agency that it was sent and that it was received, correct? So it's the same thing with the Library of Congress. Now, in the TV film world, copyright theft and copyright infringement and that kind of thing, I'm just saying from my perspective, again, I'm not a lawyer, this isn't legal advice, but from my perspective and in my career, it's been a non-issue. I've never had issues with anybody trying to rip off one of my production tracks. And in fact, what you'll realize when you get into this business is that people making tracks that sound like other tracks is like what this whole industry is based on. I mean, that's exactly what this whole business is you're going to have libraries and music supervisors going, hey, I really like the new Justin Bieber track. Can you make something like that? I mean, they're basically asking you to rip off a popular song. Now, you can't use the same melody. You can't use the same, the exact same progression that they're using. But you can definitely use similar, if not identical, drum patterns. That happens all the time in this industry. And that's not illegal to do. You can create, there's no drum pattern that's been copyrighted by Justin Bieber or his producer, that only they can use that drum pattern. That's not what can be protected under copyright law. So anybody can use the exact same drum pattern. Now, samples is a little bit different, right? So if somebody's recorded a piece of music or a vocal and it's a recorded, sound that can be easily identifiable and also is sort of recognized because it was made popular by another artist, then yeah, you're going to be running into some issues because you're using somebody else's creative effort. But if it's, sort of royalty-free loops or samples that you're using, which is mostly what you're going to be getting from a company that you get sounds to use, like Splice.com, that kind of thing. As long as you're using cleared samples that you can use, you're completely clear on this. And I've never dealt with a copyright issue in my entire almost 10 years in this business. So should you send your tracks to the Library of Congress to get them cleared? It's up to you. Honestly, if you feel like it's worth it to get that extra little bit of protection because you're kind of thinking that maybe something will happen down the line, that's on you. It is going to cost you some money, right? So I don't know what their fees are these days. At one point, it was $35 per registration, but you could, I think, blanket register an entire album, like 12 songs at once for 35. So those might have changed. Those rules might have changed. I just honestly, I'm not doing that in my career. It's just not something that I've needed to do, and it's not something that's gotten in the way of me having a successful, protected career in this business. I think most of the reason is because, this industry, you're revolving around music supervisors, libraries, that kind of thing, and not so much the public consumers. And it's the public consumers that are basically taking music, either stealing it, just grabbing music that they haven't paid for, or they're doing remixes and re-releasing them on YouTube and that kind of thing. So it can happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but in the TV film world, the consumers are not really our end consumer, right? The public is not really our consumer. Music supervisors, and editors, people who are actually looking for music for a program, a TV show or a movie or a commercial, they're the ones that we are selling to. And guess what? They have reputations. It's a small industry. They don't want to be the one known as the ones that are ripping people's music off or using it without authorization. They actually really care. If they want to have a career, they're going to do the right thing, which is pay music producers for their or at least register it on a cue sheet, right? Have a document that they've used music, because they don't want to be known as the person that takes music without permission, right? And they're going to face a lot of problems in the business if that's their new reputation. So anyways, once again, that's how you copyright, quote unquote, you copyright your music. You actually create it the minute you create the copyright, the minute that you put your song or your idea into a tangible medium. And whether or not you should register that with the Library of Congress, I'm not your lawyer. You got to decide that for yourself.